Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Danielle, aka Stitcherista, here on YouTube, and today is another face-to-face chat, and we will have a true crime story time. We're going to be talking about Chandra Levy, or is it Chandra? I had heard of that story vaguely when it happened, but don't really know the details, so it'll be a little bit new to me. But yeah, let's sit and have a chat for a second. So grab a cuppa, right? I don't know when you'll be watching this, but... So yesterday we had the arbitration and everything went pretty smooth until I want to say about 1:30, 2 o'clock. So I'm trying to explain this so you can understand it. We have 4 people editing, so we each get a unit. We each get a 10-page unit, essentially every 40 pages. And I'm always doing so many other things during the times that I am not editing that I usually don't get very many breaks. I might have 2-3 minutes before I have to pick up my next section, right? So we are connected into the live file that my boss is taking down. That's how we're able to edit, you know, right behind her. So I had about, I want to say 5 pages before I had to pick up my next unit. And the person that had the 10 pages before me, she messages in our group message app and says, I got kicked out of the file. I have to reboot my computer. And I thought to myself, okay. And so the pages kept going and I said, you know what? I said, I'm going to take your section. I'm going to take it because now we're going to be behind. Because what happens is when she gets booted out and she has to restart her computer, which I didn't understand why she has to restart her computer every time she gets booted out of the file, because when I get kicked out of the file, which rarely happens, all I have to do is close our software program and get back in it. Why do you have to restart your entire computer? And she's like, oh, my cursor was spinning. Well, do Control-Alt-Delete. Go to your task manager and just close our software program and then get back in it. You don't have to reboot your entire computer. And 9 times out of 10, when people get booted out of the file and come back in, their audio isn't caught up. And we had done already like 150 pages. So I'm going along and she's like, I'm doing her section now. My section that I was supposed to take is getting ready to come up. And I decided to still take that section because if you throw off the rotation, everyone's like, what unit do I take? You know, and I'm just like, so she says, well, let me know when I need to come back in, where you want me to come back in to edit. And I said, well, since your audio will probably not be there, just come in at page 180, which is where you would normally come in. And our proofreader sends me a text message, a private message, and says, you sound annoyed. Are you okay? I said, no, I'm not okay. I am annoyed because this happens every fucking day we have this. And we still have this for 2 more months. And my boss sent around an email last night. We're not supposed to put like our own personal like defines in the file, and people are still doing it. I don't know who's doing it because I've been a broken fucking record saying don't do it. And I wrote her back and I explained everything that happened yesterday. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, it's so hard to not be annoyed every single day we have this because of stuff like this. Now, I was glad they ended half an hour early yesterday because they had a problem with the document and the arbitrator was like, okay, we're done for today. I guarantee you by the end of this, the arbitrators are just going to be fed up with these attorneys. But it's just like, can we not? I feel like having it days in a row is somewhat beneficial though, because you get more into the routine of doing what you're supposed to do, right? We'll fucking see. Yeah. So, I had the rest of my chicken tiki masala last night because, my stepdaughter and her boyfriend came over last night for dinner instead of tonight. They usually come over on Tuesday. I don't know why they had to come over last night, but they did. And so my husband made hamburgers, and I said, I'll just eat. I said, I got to eat up that tiki masala anyway. Masala. I said, it's been in the refrigerator for a couple days. I need to eat it. So, and he had done an extra load of laundry last night because he got, like, his clothes got dirty at work. So I don't have to do laundry today. Let's go. Yeah, I was like, ooh, I'd be able to, you know, get away with a day of not doing it. So I got up this morning at 7. I've been in the routine now. I go to bed about 10:30, get up at 7, get up at 4:15 to make his lunch, but then go back to bed until 7. And he's off Thursday and Friday for Veterans Day is Thursday. And then he took off Friday, so I'll be able to sleep straight through till like 7. I won't have to get up and make his lunch on those 2 days. And we were talking about Thanksgiving because we're going to my dad's. We've been to my dad's in 2 years because of COVID. And I said, yeah, I'm really going to look forward to being off the week of Thanksgiving because I really think my boss is not going to take something Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We already would have off Thursday and Friday. And he's like, oh, I'm off too. What are we going to do? And I'm like, well, I said, I thought you weren't taking off. He told me he wasn't going to take off. I said, well, I'm going to have video stuff to do. I said, I'm probably going to wrap all the Christmas presents that I bought and have piled up in my closet because like that Friday or Saturday, we'll put up the Christmas tree. So it's just so hard to believe that Thanksgiving is only like 2 or 3 weeks away. I mean, yeah, it's crazy just how time is passing. But yeah, so I did stitch last night on Sunset. And I follow the Carolyn Manning Designs hashtag on Instagram. Man, does that make you want to stitch them all. Somebody is stitching the Northern Lights. Oh my God. Now they're stitching theirs on 16 count Aida. And those are dark colors. I don't remember, of course I have that one. I don't remember what fabric they recommend for that one, but man, it looked so good. I'm sad more the fact that I had stitched so much on Phoenix and that you were really starting to see it come together. But I'll get there on Sunset. Yeah. But I didn't switch the fabric. Remember, I don't know if I said that it's in my cross stitch vlog. I didn't switch the fabric because it's a little tedious getting the fabric on your Arabeska scroll rod. So I'm just going to leave the fabric I have on there. So yeah, I stitched a tiny bit last night, probably only for like a half hour. And I finished the book I was reading, Good as Dead. It was okay. Once you found out, like everyone found out everything, the book was almost over. So it kept my interest. I've started reading a new book last night, my 49th book. So I'm on track to read 55 books this year, basically. I'll probably might be able to read more than that though. So it is called The Husbands by Chandler Baker. And Chandler is a woman, by the way. Yeah. So this book just came out in August of this year. So here is the premise. To what lengths will a woman go for a little more help from her husband? Nora Spangler is a successful attorney, but when it comes to domestic life, she packs the lunches, schedules the doctor appointments, knows where the extra paper towel rolls are, and designs and orders the holiday cards. Her husband works hard too, but why does it seem like she is always working so much harder? That's because women notoriously do more. They do. I do a whole hell of a lot besides my job, and we don't even have children together. And there was a saying like in the book that says, you know, women can do anything, but they can't do everything, right? That was good. Okay, so when the Spanglers go house hunting in Dynasty Ranch, an exclusive suburban neighborhood, Nora meets a group of high-powered women, a tech CEO, a neurosurgeon, an award-winning therapist, a best-selling author, with enviably supportive husbands. When she agrees to help with a resident's wrongful death case, she is pulled into the lives of the women there. She finds the air is different in Dynasty Ranch. The women aren't hanging on by a thread. But as the case unravels, Nora uncovers a plot that may explain the secret to having it all, one that's worth killing for. So they are liking the book to a Stepford Wives gender swap. So if you have not seen Stepford Wives, first off, they made like a remake of it with Nicole Kidman back in the, I forget how long ago it was. That one was pretty good, but the original movie back from like the 70s or early 80s, really good, worth watching. So I won't give it away, but basically this neighborhood developed science where they could infiltrate your brain and make you like the perfect wife who did everything and looked beautiful all the time. And yeah. So these women now have done that to the husbands. I can't wait to read more of it. I'm only a couple pages in, so I think it's going to be good. Yeah. Okay. I think that was all the chit chat. Maybe. All right, so today's story. Chandra Levy. So it happened in Washington, D.C. in May of 2001. And the guy wasn't convicted until November of 2010. That's quite a while. Okay, so born on April 14th in 1977, Chandra was the daughter of Robert and Susan Levy. They lived in the town of Modesto in California. The family was Jewish and attended a synagogue called Congregation Beth Shalom. Once she had completed high school, Chandra. I'm going to say Chandra. Chandra. Ms. Levy. Chandra enrolled in San Francisco State University, where she studied for a degree in journalism. From there, she took on several intern roles in California while studying for a master's degree focused on public administration. During the final year of this program, Chandra was required to move to Washington, D.C. for another paid intern job. Now, mind you, Washington, D.C. is only about 40 minutes from me. Yeah. She would be working with the Federal Bureau of Prisons starting in October of 2000. She worked at the Bureau's main offices and was asked to focus chiefly on the Public Affairs Department. Her work was enough to impress her division head, a man named Dan Dunn, who made a special statement on her highly competent approach to dealing with the inquiries from the media pertaining to the upcoming execution of the Oklahoma bomber Timothy McVeigh. At this point, Chandra began to make plans to move in with her boyfriend. She told her landlord, suggesting to him that she was considering breaking her lease to do so. It seems she changed her mind, however, later suggesting to him that the relationship didn't work out. Despite her good work, Chandra's internship position was terminated in April 2001, as her academic eligibility had expired 4 months earlier. So, having already completed the requirements for her master's degree, Chandra was set to move back to California the following May to attend her graduation. So the last time anyone saw Chandra Levy alive was on May 1st. The D.C. Metropolitan Police Department was alerted 5 days later by Chandra's parents, calling from California to say that they had not heard from their child since the beginning of the month. The police department checked the hospitals and Chandra's apartment, and they found no signs of foul play, so that's what they said, reported to the parents. 2 days later, Chandra's father called the police again to inform them of an affair that had been taking place between his daughter and a congressman, one he would later say was Gary Condit. Really? The police received corroborating evidence from Chandra's aunt, who had also been told about the relationship. You know that stuff happens in the political world. Did you ever watch Scandal, the show? Or House of Cards, which is another good political show with Robin Wright Penn and... Oh, who's the guy? He's popular. I could see his face. He was in The Life of David Gale, the movie. That's going to bug the hell out of me, and I know someone's typing it below. I got to look it up real quick. Kevin Spacey. Yes. That was going to bug the hell out of me. Okay. So, with this information, the local police obtained a search warrant and moved in on Chandra's apartment. During their formal search of the premises, they discovered her identification, her credit cards, and her mobile phone, all stored inside her purse alongside 2 suitcases that had been partially packed. Her answering machine was full with messages, both from the police and from her family. One police officer attempted to perform a search of the laptop computer inside her apartment, but without the correct training, instead only managed to corrupt the search files. Come on now. This information on the laptop would take months for the qualified technicians to reconstruct. You big freaking dummy. After careful analysis and a lot of work, it was discovered that the machine had been used to scour the internet for information regarding Amtrak, Baskin-Robbins, Condit, Southwest Airlines, and a weather forecast by the Washington Post. I mean, think about the stuff that you search every single day on Google, just looking, right? Yeah. The final search on the computer was made to find out more information about the Pierce Klingel Mansion, the administrative hub of Rock Creek Park. Police searched the area around the building and nearby roads but found nothing, and the investigation was becoming increasingly difficult. This is kind of a long story, so settle in. Officials began... Wait a minute. One of the most important threads appeared to be the relationship that Chandra shared with Gary Condit, the U.S. congressman. It didn't take long for the relationship to hit the media, which... Coupled with Chandra's family holding numerous events and vigils designed to help find their daughter, the news networks had a great deal of material at their disposal. The mantra, "Bring Chandra home," echoed through all of the family's actions. But for the congressman, more immediate questions were being posed because, of course, Gary Condit was married. And he had first denied any involvement with Chandra. Despite the police reiterating that Condit was not a suspect in the case, it was the belief of her family that the congressman was being purposely evasive and potentially hiding a clue relating to her disappearance. And you would think that, right? Sources inside the police department who wished to remain anonymous suggested to the media that Condit has confessed to being involved in an extramarital relationship with Chandra. His descriptions to interviewing officers included his beliefs that she was both a non-smoker and a vegetarian, and that she was due to return to Washington following her graduation. It was a surprise to Condit to learn that Chandra's apartment lease had expired. Police searched the congressman's home and the home of a flight attendant named Anne Marie Smith. The pair had also been involved in an affair, though Smith had never met Chandra. Jesus Christ, can you keep your dick in your pants, Condit? My God. So officials began to investigate Condit for a possible obstruction of justice in the case of Chandra. Noting his annoyance at the media leaks involving his name, Condit refused to participate in a lie detector test with the police department. Instead, his lawyer indicated that he had taken part in a private test and had passed. Well, la-di-da, you could make that up. During a television interview, Condit avoided direct questions put to him by the news anchor. The coverage continued to intensify, the pressure rising until the sudden events on September 11th. Remember, this is the year that September 11th happened. Took over the front page news, and The coverage of Chandra's case diminished because it was replaced by, the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center, which took over the news just for a really, really long time. So polls conducted by Fox News in July of 2001 indicated that as many as 44% of the 900 voters questioned believed Condit was involved in the disappearance of Chandra. Of these, 27% felt he needed to resign from his position, while 51% believed him to be acting as though he were guilty. A similar poll taken from Condit's own district returned slightly more favorable impressions, but months later, he would lose the Democratic primary election for his seat in Congress. Ha ha! His former aide, Dennis Cardoza, took over his position, and Condit's involvement in the disappearance of Chandra was cited as a chief concern. Yeah, I bet it was. So the case began to return fewer leads. A grand jury assembled to quiz Condit on his involvement, but the date was to remain a strict secret. Already annoyed by the leaks to the press of his involvement, Condit wanted his appearance to be kept quiet, and his term would eventually finish at the beginning of 2003, and he would just leave office. Oh, someone had asked me what the name of this cup was that keeps stuff warm. It's called Ember. That's the company, and they have a shit ton of different cups. They're expensive. I received this from Vicky, from a lovely subscriber. They're about $140, so not cheap, but man, does it keep your stuff warm. Okay, so during May of 2002, let me see, how long is this? This is a long one. My God, it's really long. Wow. During May of 2002, investigators announced they had discovered the remains of a human. The skeleton was found by a dog walker who had paused to look for turtles in Rock Creek Park. The police chief, Charles Ramsey, announced that investigators had followed up the man's report by finding bones and personal effects that had been left around a secluded forested area. They had not been buried. Among the personal items found were tennis shoes, a sweatshirt, athletic leggings, and a sports bra, all of which were recovered by detectives. The zone was not included in the original search due to its remoteness and the difficulty of accessing the area, which was close to a mile from the Pierce Klingel mansion and roughly 4 miles from Chandra's apartment. Following a preliminary autopsy, the police investigators confirmed the remains were those of Chandra Levy and announced that enough evidence was present to launch a homicide case. A more complete autopsy carried out in May confirmed the death as being the result of murder. Among the evidence for homicide was the damage to specific parts of the skeleton, a clue suggesting that the killer might have strangled the victim. But with such scant evidence and remains available, the doctors confessed that they might never be able to tell for certain exactly what caused her death. In addition to what was recovered by the police, a private investigator searching through the area recovered a shin bone. The additional evidence was around 25 yards from the original site and was found by a man that the Levy family had hired to investigate Chandra's death. So they hired somebody different. Police described this extra recovery as unacceptable, lamenting the fact that police had not recovered the shin bone themselves. So they were more salty about that, right? In 2002, the family organized a memorial service to be held back in their hometown of Modesto, California. Over 1,000 people attended the ceremony, which lasted for an hour and a half. The remains would be buried a year later, with Chandra's final resting place being chosen as Lakewood Memorial Park Cemetery in California. The private ceremony saw only 40 people in attendance, mainly those who were close to the family. At the culmination of the funeral, the release of a dozen white doves marked the close of the ceremony. But the investigation was still having difficulty. They hadn't solved this case yet. But perhaps the biggest lead arrived in September of 2001, just when the world was distracted by the World Trade Center stuff. Investigators had received contact from a man held in a Washington jail who claimed that he possessed pertinent information regarding the death of Chandra Levy. The informant's identity was kept a strict secret out of safety concerns, but his information pointed directly at a man named Ingmar Guandique as being heavily involved in the case. Ingmar was a 20-year-old immigrant from El Salvador, being held in prison for assaulting a pair of women in the same park where Chandra's remains were found. According to the informant, Ingmar claimed to have been paid $25,000 to kill Chandra. Why? Despite this information, police ruled out the potential involvement of Condit and the idea that he may have paid to have her killed based on the fact that Ingmar had already assaulted women in the very same park. Coupled with this, he had failed to arrive at his place of work on the day of the murder. A testimony from Ingmar's landlady suggested that he had arrived home that same night with cuts and scratches along his face. So Chandra must have fought back, I guess, right? However, Ingmar's other victims were not interviewed. Charles Ramsey, the police chief leading the investigation, refused to classify Ingmar as a suspect, instead referring to him as a person of interest. He requested that media reporters should not make a big deal about the involvement of Ingmar, at least not yet, right? Separate from the investigation, Ingmar was sent to prison for the assaults he had committed on 2 women in Rock Creek Park. When asked about Chandra, he denied being involved. Investigating further, the FBI decided to have him take a polygraph test, and he failed. A similar test carried out on Ingmar ruled that the answers he provided were not deceptive, due to the fact, oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay. The FBI had the informant take a polygraph test, and he failed. So they both failed. The guy in prison that was the informant and Ingmar. So, due to the fact that both men spoke very little English, police commented that they would have preferred a bilingual person to have carried out the test. Such a person was unavailable at the time. So the judge who sentenced Ingmar for his assaults was asked about the involvement of the man in the case of Chandra Levy, but the judge dismissed the matter as a satellite issue. Ingmar received 10 years in jail for assaulting the 2 women at Rock Creek Park, and without any further leads, Chandra's case went cold. And it would remain a cold case until 2006. So during this time, Charles Ramsey was succeeded by Kathy Lanier as the chief of police in Washington, D.C. She appointed 3 veteran homicide investigators to take over the case, and the Washington Post appointed a team of reporters to reevaluate the information available to them. So the newspaper began to publish a series of stories connecting the failures of the police department in connecting Ingmar to the crime, and acting on the renewed interest, a search of Ingmar's prison cell recovered a photograph of Chandra that had been saved from a magazine. The detectives appointed to the case began to interview acquaintances and associates of Ingmar, as well as the witnesses in the cases of assault for which he was currently in prison for. So this work led the team to issue a warrant for the arrest of Ingmar in March of 2009, 8 years after Chandra was killed. After a few days switching between custody and being interviewed by a series of officers, Ingmar was charged with the murder of Chandra, and he was indicted on 6 counts: kidnapping, first-degree murder, attempted first-degree sexual abuse, first-degree murder, attempted robbery, and first-degree murder. Just a whole bunch of shit, right? Despite the charges, he pleaded not guilty. His trial was set for January 2010, and one argument made by his lawyers suggested that the jail cell was not within the jurisdiction of a search warrant issued by the court. This, coupled with the contamination of several pieces of DNA evidence, meant that the trial was rescheduled for the following October. Selection of jury members began in October of 2010. The potential witnesses put forward by the U.S. attorney included an FBI agent who had worked on the case and the 2 women whom Ingmar had been convicted of assaulting in the park. Okay. Initial forecasts for the trial set the time for the prosecution at 4 weeks, and the time estimated for the defense was just 1 day. Wow, really? On the 25th and 26th of October, the women testified about the time they had been assaulted by Ingmar. Both had been jogging in the same park where Chandra's remains had been found, and one testimony included the details that Ingmar had grabbed the woman from behind and then dragged her down into a ravine while holding a knife against her face. Oh my God. Also testifying was Robert Levy, Chandra's father. So 64 years old at the time of trial, he began to refute statements he had made regarding his suspicion of Congressman Condit in the murder. He told the courtroom that during the early years of the investigation, he had suspected that Condit had been involved and that Chandra would have been too cautious to be running alone in the woods. He no longer believed this to be true. Another involved the idea that he had given so he refuted also the idea that he had given to police that Chandra and Condit had shared a 5-year plan for their futures involving their eventual marriage. Levy confessed to saying whatever came into his head regarding Condit's involvement in the case. I've read that wrong. Levy confessed to saying whatever came into his head regarding Condit's involvement in the case. So at that time, he was just so distraught over her death, which of course you would understand that he just wished to paint the congressman as the villain, right? His mind was changed, he told the court, when he learned of the involvement of Ingmar. And Condit took the stand himself. He was asked on 3 separate occasions about the nature of the relationship between himself and Chandra. He refused to respond, citing the privacy of both himself and Chandra. An FBI biologist who did testify told the court of the DNA match between sperm found on Chandra's underwear and the congressman's own DNA profile. Really? One of the key testimonies for the prosecution came from Armando Morales, the man who shared a cell with Ingmar in Kentucky. He mentioned Ingmar being concerned about having to transfer between prisons due to the hostility and violence shown by other inmates towards those who had committed rape. Both men were members of the Mara Salvatrucha gang. When confiding in Morales, Ingmar had confessed to having killed Chandra while attempting to steal from her. Despite this confession, Ingmar remained resolute that he had not raped the woman. Oh, so she had been raped as well. 2 of the charges were dropped by the prosecution on the 10th of November as they rested their case. The defense chose not to call Ingmar to the stand. A selection of prison inmates were called up by the defense and began to refute the testimony given by Morales. One suggested there had been no mention of rape or murder during the time the group shared the cell in Kentucky. While being cross-examined, however, one did admit that he had wished to refrain from appearing too nosy and had spent a large amount of time asleep recovering from a bullet wound. A further 2 charges were dropped by the prosecution due to the statute of limitations expiring, meaning Ingmar was no longer being prosecuted for either kidnapping or armed robbery. So the remaining charges were first-degree murder committed during a kidnapping and during a robbery. It was the prosecution's assertion that Ingmar had bound and gagged Chandra before leaving her to die of exposure and dehydration in the park. Oh man, that had to have been a horrible death then. So to counter this point, the defense reiterated the lack of DNA evidence linking Ingmar to the scene of the crime. While labeling the case against Ingmar as fiction, the defense posited the theory that Chandra had been murdered elsewhere and had then been dumped in the park. I don't know how as a jury you take all that information in and be able to give a good verdict, right? So it took 2 days for the jury to almost reach a verdict. All members but one returned a guilty plea. On the 3rd day, the jury requested that the judge clarify the definition of assault as it pertained to the case. The judge responded with the assertion that assault could technically be any injury, no matter how small it might be. After 2 more days of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict in which they voted unanimously to convict Ingmar. When asked about the verdict after the trial, a member of the jury mentioned that the testimony of Morales had played a key role in the group reaching their decision. For some, the verdict was described as miraculous due to the reaching of a guilty verdict despite there being only circumstantial evidence. Despite the case going cold for a number of years, the case had been eventually solved using only a small amount of evidence. So Gladys Weatherspoon, who had represented Ingmar during the earlier assault charges, confessed that she was worried by the jury's verdict and the fact they had always seemed destined to reach a decision of guilty. Well, she mentioned the presence of Chandra's mother in the courtroom as causing the jury to feel sorry for the family. After the trial, the Levy family held a press conference in which they admitted that despite the verdict, there was no sense of closure regarding the death of their daughter. So, because of the nature of the jury's decision, an appeal always seemed to be likely, right? In February of 2011, Ingmar's lawyers requested there be a retrial, citing their suspicion that the verdict had not been attained in the proper manner. Okay. The team for the prosecution opposed such a move, claiming that the issue regarding the notes was simply a technical issue and held no significant effect on the jury. So the prosecution, Ingmar's lawyers said they put together a 17-page report detailing their issues with the case, including claims that the prosecution team had made appeals to the emotions of the case rather than the facts, and that one juror had referred to the notes of another juror, despite the judge's instructions that this would not be allowed. Ooh. So Ingmar faced the possibility of spending 30 years to life in jail. At most, he would be imprisoned for life without the possibility of parole. This was the sentence sought by the prosecution, who said that Ingmar was always unable to control himself and that he would always pose a significant threat to women. I mean, you know, he did this a bunch of times, so yeah. A memo was submitted to the courts before sentencing mentioning Ingmar's harassment of female prison staff. Oh. An American attorney was also dispatched to El Salvador to investigate Ingmar's criminal past. They suspected he had been forced to flee the country because of his attacks against women. So I'm guessing that Chandra was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. With sentencing due to begin on February 11th in 2011, Ingmar said to the family of Chandra that he was sorry for what had happened to their daughter, but he continued to maintain his innocence. Chandra's mother demanded an answer from Ingmar. She asked him directly whether he was the one who killed her daughter, demanding that the suspect look her in the eye and tell her, but that did not happen. Any motions requesting a retrial were denied, and instead Ingmar received 60 years in jail. In a closing statement, the judge remarked that Ingmar would remain a danger to women and others for some time and described him as a sexual predator. Throughout, the accused protested his innocence, so he's still saying he's innocent. So, over the coming years, it was still not entirely possible to put the cold case to bed. Despite the murder of Chandra being committed in 2001, grand juries and courts discussed the case through the early 2010s. Occasional evidence came to surface and occasional claims were made for a retrial. Often, the media was not given details of the court's decisions in each instance. For many, the case of Chandra had reached a satisfying conclusion with the imprisonment of Ingmar. But the story doesn't end there. As recently as May of 2015, prosecutors have abandoned their opposition to Ingmar receiving a retrial. A new witness found by the defense has led to new evidence coming to light. A neighbor of Chandra's placed a phone call to the emergency services on the last day Chandra was reported alive. She recalls hearing a blood-curdling scream coming from an area that may have included Chandra's apartment. Despite the case being closed, this cold case could see further developments in coming years. It just goes to show it is often impossible to truly consider a case as closed, cold, or suitably solved even after a conviction. So he may not have even done it, given that none of his stuff was found, and he said he didn't rape her. That's very interesting. Wow. How horrible for the parents, though, because there's no closure. Like, you don't really know if he did it. You don't know. Wow. So, had you guys, obviously you probably heard of the case. I mean, it was all over the news for sure. But yeah, how awful though, for just, 10 years of just that, going through that for the parents and everything. But okay, so I meant to say also earlier that my Diamond Art Club order shipped. Yeah, it was Faces of Fairy 132. So it is a round diamond painting with 46 colors, including 4 ABs, 32,000 diamonds. So let me show you the picture. Can I click on it? I'm going to see if it'll bring up the picture of it. It's coming tomorrow. It's going to be here Wednesday. Here it is. 1 minute. It's this one. I had to get it. It was so cool looking, right? Isn't it so cute? I absolutely love it. Yeah. Okay, guys, I'm going to end this here. Give me your thoughts down below on Chandra's case. Do you think that Ingmar did it? I'm thinking no. I mean, it was coincidence that he had assaulted other women in that park, but I don't know. So, as always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.